Welcome everyone. Myself Dr. Nagalapura Pradeep, Assistant Professor in the Department of Civil Engineering at SR University. Today I'm starting the new course on disaster management, which is highly relevant in the present global context where disasters are increasing in frequency as well as intensity. This course is not just a theoretical course, it directly connects to real life situations where lives, the infrastructure, and economies are at risk. So, in this session, we'll begin the study of disaster management. So, before entering into the technical content, I just want you to carefully think about two real world scenarios. The first one, why do earthquakes cause more deaths in cities compared to villages? And coming to the second scenario, you people know about the Odisha. This Odisha was frequently hit by the cyclones. So, this Odisha was affected by two cyclones similar intensity in 1999 and in 2013. So, how did this Odisha reduce disaster deaths from more than 10,000 in 1992 fewer than 50 in later cyclone? So these are not the random differences. They reflect the role of planning, engineering systems, preparedness, and governance. So in 1999, a super cyclone caused massive destruction in Odisha, leading to nearly 10,000 deaths. After 15 years, a stronger cyclone compared to 1999 struck the same region. Yet the loss of life was very minimal compared to 1999 situation. So this change did not happen by chance. It was the result of structured disaster management practices the government followed, which includes early warning systems, evacuation strategies, and resilient infrastructure designs that withstand cyclones and earthquakes. In the coming slides, I will discuss this real case study in detail. So, this course will systematically explain how such transformations are possible and how engineering and planning can directly reduce the disaster impacts. So, coming to the next slide. So, coming to the second slide, now consider a fundamental question that forms the basis of disaster management. Why do thousands of people die in one disaster while another similar event results in very few casualties? So, at the first glance, one might assume that the difference is due to the severity of the natural event. However, detailed analysis shows that this assumption is very much incorrect. So here I'm introducing a new term that is called hazard. Usually the earthquakes or cyclones or tsunamis or any chemical attacks usually be termed as disaster. But in actual sense, these we called as hazard. The hazard such as earthquake or cyclone may be similar in both the cases. However, the outcomes differ drastically because of variations in preparedness, infrastructural design and planning. So urban areas, for example, often experiences higher casualties during earthquakes due to dense populations and poorly designed buildings. In contrast, rural areas may experience less damage if structures are simpler and populations are very less concentrated. So the correct interpretation is that the outcome of a disaster is not controlled solely by nature. It is controlled by a combination of preparedness, engineering designs, and proper planning. If these elements are strong, the impact of hazards can be minimized. If the if the combination of preparedness, design, and planning is weak, even a moderate hazard also can cause very severe damage. This principle forms the foundation of disaster risk prediction strategies. Okay, so the basic difference between first one and second one, the basic difference is preparedness, design, and planning. So the total discussion I illustrated in one image. Coming to the next slide. So in this image, you can see the left side portion is disaster and the right side portion also same area, similar disaster happened. The basic difference is in the first time the people are not yet ready. There is no warning system, there is no evacuation, and there is a weak infrastructure and the community is unprepared. The end result is thousands of people died. So coming to the right side, same disaster, but because of the early warnings, evacuation plans, and there is a strong resilient infrastructure and the community is properly prepared, the end result is almost no loss of death. So the basic difference between these two scenarios, the answer is not the nature, the answer is engineering, right? So coming to the next slide, so in this slide, I just want to explain the basic difference between hazard versus vulnerability versus disaster. So to understand disaster management very clearly, it is very much necessary to distinguish between these three terms: hazard, vulnerability, and disaster. So these three terms are interconnected but represent different concepts. So coming to the hazard, a hazard is any potential harmful event or process, so which the basic examples includes earthquakes, floods, cyclones, landslides, and industrial accidents. So these we consider as hazards. These hazards are either natural or man-made phenomena that have the potential to cause damage. They have the potential to cause damage. So actual damage is not happening. They have the potential to cause the damage. So now coming to the second most important term, that is called vulnerability. The vulnerability refers to the degree to which a system or a community or a structure is susceptible to damage. So in simple sense, if I want to explain the vulnerability, so whatever be the hazard, because of that hazard, the most affected system, that that most affected system, in simple sense, that most affected system we called as vulnerable system. The factors contributing to vulnerability includes weak construction, there is a lack of awareness between the people, poor proper planning, there is no proper drainage, and the poverty and inadequate infrastructure. So coming to the vulnerability, vulnerability determines how severely a hazard will affect a population. So this is what the hazard and vulnerability. Now coming to the exact term, actual term, what we'll study, that is called disaster. A disaster occurs when hazard impacts a vulnerable population and causes significant damage and disruption. So in that situation, the hazard is converted into disaster because that vulnerability percentage is very high and very severe. So without vulnerability, a hazard may not be lead to a disaster. For example, a strong earthquake in an uninhabited area does not result in a disaster, right? If same thing happened in a dense populated city, it is converted into, that hazard is converted into disaster. This relationship shows that reducing vulnerability is the most effective way to minimize the disaster impact. See, we cannot control or we cannot um, manage the earthquakes or tsunamis or cyclones, but if we can reduce the vulnerability, that is the most effective way to minimize the disaster impacts, right? So coming to the next slide, so this slide is about concept of illustration. So the figure shown in this slide represents the relationship between hazard, vulnerability, and disaster. It visually demonstrates how these components interact to produce different outcomes. For suppose if that vulnerability is very high, even a moderate hazard can result in severe disaster. For example, a moderate flood in an area with poor drainage and very weak infrastructure can cause significant damage. On the other hand, if vulnerability is very low, even a strong hazard may have limited impact. For instance, a powerful cyclone may cause minimal damage in a region where the infrastructure is very strong and they have very strong evacuation system. This illustration emphasizes that controlling hazard is often difficult, but reducing vulnerability is achievable through engineering, planning, and policy measures. So, still, if you don't understand anything, I just want to explain this image. You can see the left side. There is rock mass is sliding from the hilly area, and the toe of that rock, the toe of the hilly area, there is one person is sitting, right? So, the sliding of rock mass represents the hazard, and the person who is standing at the toe of the hill is the vulnerable person. For suppose if that person will not will move from that area and the just rock mass is sliding down to the toe, and it won't create any kind of disaster. Instead of moving from that area, if the person is still standing there and the rock mass is directly hitting that person, that hazard is converted into disaster. Therefore, the disaster management primarily focuses on vulnerability reduction. Here, you cannot control the sliding of rock mass, but you can control the person, the vulnerable person, whether he can stay there or you can easily evacuate that person from that situation. So, in this disaster management, the primarily focus on the vulnerability reduction. So, understanding this concept is essential for designing effective disaster mitigation strategies. So, coming to the next slide, then what is disaster? Now, let us define the term disaster in a very precise manner. A disaster is often misunderstood as a natural event such as earthquake, flood, or cyclone. We discussed already in the previous slide. However, this definition is incomplete and technically incorrect. A disaster occurs only when a hazard interacts with vulnerable system. So a hazard is potentially damaging event, but it does not automatically lead to disaster. That vulnerability refers to the level of exposure and inability of a community or a system to cope up with the hazard. So when these two elements are combined, the result is significantly loss of life, damage to the property, and disruption of normal societal functions. So here again, I'm discussing about the new example. A cyclone over the ocean is not considered as a disaster. The same cyclone hitting an unprepared coastal area, it becomes the disaster, right? Now, see whatever I explained till now, I illustrated with the help of one image. You can see the second image. The vulnerability is because near the coastal areas, if the houses are very weak, and there is no early warning system, and there is no evacuation plan, and there is no lack of awareness among the community, and if the people are very poor, they are belongs to poverty group, then this hazard will create disaster. So here the key message is hazards are natural. Hazards are natural. Disasters are not natural. By reducing the vulnerability, we can prevent the disasters. With this, I'll talk about the types of disasters. So disasters can be classified based on their origin or based on their cause. The most common classification divides disasters into natural and man-made categories. So natural disasters are caused by the natural processes. You know what are the natural disasters, which includes earthquakes, floods, cyclones, droughts, tsunamis, volcanoes, forest fire, hurricanes, tornadoes, snowstorm, dust storm, the hailstorm, thunderstorms, sinkholes, then windstorms and avalanches. See here, you people know about the majority of the natural disasters. Here, I just want to, because I belongs to the civil, especially geotechnical specialization. I just want to emphasis on two things that is called sinkholes and earthquakes. See, there is one concept in geotechnical engineering that is called liquefaction potential. For suppose our building, our infrastructure is we constructed on foundation. That foundation is laid on soil. That soil is solid system. So when that solid system becomes liquid system, either our infrastructure will float on that water, that liquid, or it will submerge into the liquid phase. So that concept we called as sinkhole, liquefaction potential. In disaster management, we called as sinkhole. So in coming classes, I'll explain in detail. And coming to the avalanche, it is just sliding of ice on the glaciers. If you watch the Bahubali movie, so in that movie, that younger Prabhas, he saved Tamanna from sliding off a ice glacier. So that hazard we called as avalanches, right? So coming to the man-made disasters, so these natural disasters are influenced by either geological, hydrological, and atmospheric conditions. Coming to the second category, man-made disasters, these are resulting from human activities. Examples which includes industrial accidents, chemical spills, fire accidents, nuclear incidents, and environmental pollution. So these disasters often preventable through proper safety measures and regulations. So this classification is very much important because the approach to manage these disasters are different from natural to man-made. Natural disasters require monitoring and early warning systems, while man-made disasters require strict regulation and safety protocols. So understanding the type of disaster also help in selecting appropriate mitigation and responsible strategies. So many people have doubts about what is the meaning of mitigation. So mitigation means how you are facing that situation, right? So coming to the next slide, this slide is talking about impacts of disasters. So disasters have wide-ranging impacts that extend far beyond immediate physical damage. So these impacts affect multiple systems simultaneously, which includes as a society, the economy, the environment, as well as public health. So, the impacts of disasters are categorized into four broad categories, where social is directly connected to the people, and economic is directly related to the money, the environmental is directly related to ecosystem, and the final one, public health. So, understanding these interconnected effects is essential for effective disaster management. From a social perspective, disasters cause loss of life, the displacement of populations, and disruption of communities in that location. Families may lose their homes, livelihood, and access to essential services such as education and healthcare. The social instability often increases after major disasters due to migration and resource scarcity. And second category was economical. Economically, disasters lead to the destruction of infrastructure such as road systems, bridges, buildings, infrastructure, and public utilities. So these results are very much significant, causes very much significant financial losses and slows down the country economic development. So industries and business may shut down temporarily or permanently depending upon the type of disaster, leading to unemployment and reduced economic productivity. So coming to that third category, third impact, the environmental impact, which includes the soil erosion, the water contamination, because the sea water and the surface normal water both will be mixed, and that surface water will not be available for drinking purpose. There is a more chances of water contamination, and then deforestation and loss of biodiversity. For example, flood can degrade land quality, while industrial disasters can pollute air and water resources. You people know about the Bhopal gas tragedy, Chernobyl. Anyhow, we'll discuss in the coming classes. And coming to the final one, that is public health. It is also severely affected. So disasters can lead to injuries, and then after disaster, people will go to the shelters where proper sanitation is not there, water is not available, there is a more chances of spreading of the diseases, there is a lack of clean water and reduced access to medical care. So and people are only talking about these things. The one major point after disaster is the mental health issues such as trauma and stress are very common. So this comes under post disaster post stress disaster syndrome. So these mental health issues such as trauma and stress is very common among 100 people. Nearly 40 to 50% they're undergoing severe trauma after the disaster. So till now we are discussing about hazard, disaster, vulnerability, and preparedness, all these things. Now exactly now this slide is talking about what is disaster management. So the disaster management is a systematic process. So here now I'm explaining the management. Till now I'm talking about the disaster only. So this slide is talking about the management. So the disaster management is a systematic process that deals with all types of disaster, which includes man-made or natural, whether it is a natural or man-made. So it is focuses on minimizing the impact of disasters through a structured approach that includes preparation, response, and recovery. So the preparation will respond The first stage is preparation. Here the management includes three terms, that is called preparation. Second stage is response. Third one is recovery. Now we are talking about the first stage, that is called preparation. So this preparation involves planning, and we can assess the risk, and developing early warning systems, and training the local communities. The preparedness ensures that when a disaster occurs, so the response is organized and efficient. And coming to the second stage is response. This includes all the actions taken during a disaster to save lives and reduce the damage. The main examples which includes the evacuation, rescue, operations, medical assistance, and emergency communications. These five operations, evacuation, rescue operations, medical assistance, and emergency communication, these are not belongs to the preparation, because preparation will talk about before the disaster occurred, how we are prepared. And this comes under the category of response. So during the disaster phase, how we are reacting to that situation. And the third stage is recovery. This involves restoring normal conditions after a disaster. So it includes rebuilding the infrastructure, and we are providing the financial assistance and rehabilitating to the affected communities for the disaster. So the disaster management is not a one-time activity. It is a continuous cycle where each stage influences the next stage. So the effective disaster management reduces risk, saves lives, and ensures faster recovery. With this note, coming to the next slide, this slide is talking about the disaster management cycle. This slide presents disaster management as a continuous cycle rather than a linear process. Because in linear process we have start and we have end, but in continuous cycle there is no end. This cycle consists of, as we discussed already, this cycle consists of preparation, response, and recovery, each connected to the other. So in preparation, which includes activities such as hazard identification, risk assessment, planning, and capacity building, these activities aim to reduce vulnerability before disaster occurs. And the response involves immediate actions taken during the disaster. We discussed already. This includes emergency services, rescue operations, and providing relief to affected populations. The effectiveness of the response depending heavily on the level of preparedness. And the third stage, recovery, focuses on restoring normally after the disaster, which includes rebuilding infrastructure, restoring livelihoods, and implementing and improvements to reduce the future risk. See, here in recovery, people are talking about, see how this recovery and preparedness are interconnected. For suppose, when cyclone hits, we lost everything, infrastructure. We'll start reconstructing the infrastructure. While reconstructing the infrastructure, we have to consider resistance to the cyclones. We'll consider the new resisting buildings, new building bylaws, so which also interconnected to preparedness. So an important aspect of this cycle is the feedback. Lessons learned during the recovery are used to improve future preparedness. This makes disaster management a dynamic and evolving process. So understanding this cycle helps in designing comprehensive disaster management strategy. So this disaster management cycle I have taken from the Disaster Risk Management Handbook. So coming to the next slide, why this course? So now I'll summarize what we discussed, and I'll explain the real case study as I promised in the first slide. So that Odisha cyclone I'll explain. So coming to this slide, so why this course is designed? What is the importance of this course? Why it is useful to the people? This course is designed to provide both theoretical knowledge and practical understanding of disaster management. This importance of this course lies in its ability to prepare individuals and as a communities to handle real world emergencies effectively. So nowadays the nature is very much unpredictable. So as an individual and as a community, we are ready to handle these real world emergencies. So one of the primary objective is to raise awareness about different types of disasters and their impact. So awareness is the first step in reducing the vulnerability. So without understanding the risk, it is not possible to prepare effectively. So this course also teaches safety measures that help protect lives and property. For suppose many people in the urban area, they don't know to building bylaws. So if the government is ready to implementing building bylaws to resist the cyclones, earthquake, it is very much useful to the people. So these measures include evacuation plannings, use of safety equipment, and understanding warning signals. In some locations, government may give the warning system, but the people they don't even know. So this is a warning system. So government has to train the people. So what is the meaning of that warning system? Another important aspect is recovery. This course explains how communities can recover quickly and efficiently after a disaster. So this includes rehabilitation strategies and resource management. And teamwork and coordination is also emphasized. Disaster management requires collaboration between individuals, communities, and government agencies. So finally, this course encourages a culture of preparedness. Being prepared should become a habit, not just reaction to emergency. Uh, So coming to the next slide, sorry for the delay, because here I have incorporated two videos, the Odisha super cyclone hit in 1999 and similar cyclone hit in 2013. So this slide is about case study introduction. So this slide introduces a case study that demonstrates the practical application of disaster management principle. So this case study compares two major cyclones that affected Odisha, that is super cyclone of 1999 and cyclone Phailin in 2013. Both cyclones were severe in terms of intensity and potential damage. However, their outcomes were drastically different. So in 1999 cyclone resulted in massive loss of life as well as infrastructure, while in 2013 cyclone caused minimal casualties despite similar intensity of cyclone. This comparison provides a clear example of how disaster management practices can influence outcomes. So what is the reason for reducing the reducing the death? Because after 1999, the Orissa government started establishing disaster management board, and which is the best disaster management board, one of the best disaster management board in India. So it highlights the importance of preparedness, early warning systems, instructions to development, and community awareness. So you can go through these videos from I have mentioned the sources. So these videos are available in the YouTube. So coming to the next slide, just a second. So coming to the next slide. So what actually happened in 1999? In October 1999, Orissa experienced one of the most devastating cyclones in its history. So the cyclone has wind speeds exceeding 250 kilometers per hour and generated tidal waves reaching heights of 7 to 10 meters. So here I mentioned one term called wind speed exceeding 250 kilometers per hour. So that intensity we'll discuss in the coming classes. So this 250 kilometer per hour will related to super cyclone. So the impact was catastrophic. So more than 10,000 people lost their lives and millions were affected. So infrastructure such as houses, roads, and communication systems were severely damaged. So agricultural lands was flooded, leading to long-term economic losses. So the major reason for such high level of destruction was the lack of preparedness, and the people don't know that time. People they don't know the meaning of early warning systems, either it is inadequate or not effectively communicated. There were limited evacuation plans, and people were not aware of safety measures. The people they didn't even know what is the safety protocol, and the coordination between the government agencies was also very weak, which delayed responses efforts. So this disaster exposed, sorry, this disaster exposed significant gaps in disaster management system and highlighting the need for major reforms in the government. So after 1919 super cyclone incident, so the Orissa government they started taking initiation to um, provide to the construct disaster management board. So coming to the next slide. So what are the post 1999 improvements? After the 1999 cyclone, the government of Odisha implemented several reforms to strengthen disaster management. One of the key steps was establishment of the Odisha State Disaster Management Authority, one of the finest disaster management board in the world. So efforts were made to construct cyclone shelters in vulnerable coastal areas. These shelters provided safe locations for people during the cyclones. So communication systems were improved to ensure timely dissemination of warnings. And they're providing training to the local people. They conducted community training programs to educate the people about disaster preparedness plan and responses. And they conducted regular mock drills to ensure that people knew how to act during the emergencies. And the coordination between different governmental departments was enhanced to improve the efficiency. So early warning systems were upgraded with support from national agencies such as Indian Meteorological Department. So these measures significantly reduced vulnerability and improved the overall disaster management framework. So, and what happened in 2013? There is cyclone called Cyclone Phailin in 2013. In October, same month, October 2013, Cyclone Phailin struck Odisha with wind speeds of around 200 kilometers per hour. So the cyclone was similar in intensity to the 1999 super cyclone and posed a serious threat to life and property. So heavy rainfall and strong storm surges affected coastal regions. Based on past experiences, authorities anticipated the potential impact and prepared accordingly. So, unlike in 1999, the region was now equipped with better infrastructure and improved communication system. They trained the communities and the people know the meaning of early warning systems. This set the stage for more effective responses. So the cyclone provided an opportunity to test the improvements made in disaster management over the years, and the Odisha Disaster Management Board they succeeded in this act. Now, majority countries in India they are following this Odisha Disaster Management Board. So, what are the actions taken in 2013? So, during Cyclone Phailin, several effective actions were taken that significantly reduced the impact. Early warnings were issued well in advance, allowing sufficient time for preparation. A large-scale evacuation was carried out, moving millions of people to safe locations. Cyclone shelters were used effectively to protect the vulnerable population, and majorly the community awareness played a crucial role. The local people they don't wait for the central government or state government to came and rescue the people. So people understand the importance of evacuation and follow the instructions, and government agencies coordinated effectively, ensuring smooth execution of response activities. As a result, the number of deaths was reduced to less than 50. If exactly speaking, as per reports, the number of deaths was reported 18. Although there was a huge damage to property and crops similar to 1999 super cyclone, the loss of life was very minimal. So this demonstrates the effectiveness of well-planned disaster management strategies. And now government thought this was the very much necessary to all the people. So now they introduced into the curriculum. And what are the key learnings? So the comparison between two cyclones provides several important lessons. One key lesson is that early warning systems are very much critical, and accurate forecast and timely communications can save thousands of lives. So the government know there may be the disaster and they provided the early warning system. But if the people are not responded, they don't even know the meaning of early warning system. Then again, the government cannot do any kind of remedial measures. So they'll timely communicated and people also they're aware about the early warning systems. So here the preparedness is another important factor. Investment in infrastructure such as cyclone shelters and evacuation plans directly reduces the risks. And community participation is also very much essential as local people play a major role in implementing the safety measures. If you watch the movie 2018, so similar incident cyclone happened in Kerala, how the local community people are behaving to that, responding to that disaster, to that cyclone. You can watch that movie so that you can understand what is a community-based disaster management plan. And government coordination also ensures that resources are used very efficiently during the emergencies. There is a clear goals defined and responsibilities to improve response effectiveness. So finally, learning from past disaster is very much crucial. Implementing lessons from previous events strengthens resilience and reduces future risks. These principles form the core of a disaster management principle. So, based on the our previous discussion, so I have designed the course structure. The course is organized into 5 units, each focusing on a specific aspect of disaster management. So, coming to the unit one, which introduces the basic concepts, impacts, and mitigation strategies. It also covers legal framework and the role of government and international organizations. Unity is mainly focusing on natural disasters such as floods, earthquakes, and cyclones. And Unit 3 covers man-made disasters, which includes industrial and environmental hazards. And Unit 4 deals with disaster preparedness, including early warning systems and response strategies. And Unit 5 includes the real-world case studies and surveys to provide practical insights. So this structured approach ensures a comprehensive understanding of disaster management goals. And the main outcomes, learning outcomes of this course, by the end of this course, students will develop a clear understanding of different types of disasters and their impacts. They will learn how disaster management can be integrated into planning and policy. Students will understand the role of emergency management systems in response and recovery. They will also learn about the importance of media in disaster communication. So, if you know, in COVID-19 time, a lot of misinformation is transferred through different social media. So, people are more panic about the daily news spreading through the social media. So, here the media will play a crucial role uh, to maintain the proper communication. This course will also help to identify vulnerable groups and understand how to reduce their risks. Students will gain practical knowledge that can be applied in real world situations. These outcomes ensure the students are prepared to contribute effectively to disaster management. So coming to the career opportunities, so disaster management offers various career opportunities in both government sectors as well as private sector. Organizations such as National Disaster Management Authority and Indian Meteorological Department actively recruitment professionals in this field. Roles which includes disaster management officer, relief and rehabilitation officer, civil defense instructor, and disaster risk consultant. So opportunities also exist in emergency services such as National Disaster Response Force that we'll discuss in coming classes. So these roles involve planning, coordination and risk assessment and implementation of disaster management strategies. So with increasing awareness and climate change impacts, the demand for professionals in this field is very much growing. So to if you want to give early warning systems, you have to forecast the disaster. For that, with the help of integration of AI and ML, nowadays people are forecasting the disasters with 80 to 90% success prediction. So these are the reference books I have provided to support your learning. Several reference books are recommended. The textbooks by A.K. Srivastava provides a comprehensive overview of disaster management concepts. The book by P. Kumar offers detailed explanations and practical examples. IGNOU material is also useful for understanding theoretical frameworks and case studies. So these resources will help deepen your understanding and provide additional insights beyond my classroom teaching. So coming to the summary of the first lesson, so in this lecture, I know this lecture is very much theoretically oriented because I have covered total disaster management course in the first lecture. This is the synopsis, if I can say, this is the abstract of this subject. So in this, we discuss the importance of disaster management and its relevance in modern society. We examine a real case study comparing two cyclones and understanding how preparedness can reduce the disaster impacts. So we define the key terms such as hazard, vulnerable, and disasters. So in this lecture, we defined only these three terms. In-depth explanation will discuss in the coming classes. We explored the impacts of disaster on society, economic, environmental, as well as health. So we also discussed the structure of course and the expected learning outcomes. So this lecture provides a foundation for understanding more advanced topics in disaster management. And coming to the final slide, so this concludes the introductory lecture on disaster management. The concept discussed today will serve as a foundation for the entire course. So in the next lecture, we'll explore disaster concepts in greater depth, which includes risk assessment and mitigation strategies. And thank you for your attention. So for any queries or feedback, welcome everyone. Myself Dr. Nagalapura Pradeep, Assistant Professor in the Department of Civil Engineering at SR University. Today I'm starting the new course on disaster management, which is highly relevant in the present global context where disasters are increasing in frequency as well as intensity. This course is not just a theoretical course, it directly connects to real life situations where lives, the infrastructure, and economies are at risk. So, in this session, we'll begin the